The weather outside now, at time recording, more or less represents the mood that people have to this decade when regarding Doctor Who. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, Nick here, and welcome to my top 10 Doctor Who stories from the 2010s. So basically, I'll be ranking my top 10 Doctor Who stories from 2010 to 2019. By the way, I will be counting the end of time as both the 2000s and the 2010 stories that aired in 2009 and 2010 in separate episodes, similar to The Horns of Nymon airing its first half in 1979 and the second half in 1980. I consider it 1970s and 80s. Before we also start, I'll give a quick shout out to Sharda due to the 2017 version coming out in 2017, but I won't be counting that on this list. It won't even have the Fourth Doctor honourable/dishonourable mention, but it is in the top 10 of my 1980s rankings, so go and check that out if you want to see Sharda on one of these lists. And it's also on my top 10 Fourth Doctor stories ranking as well. Okay, so the 2010s is probably debatably the most polarizing decade of Doctor Who. Depending who you ask me, it's either this or the 1980s. This doesn't include the Wilderness years. If we were including the Wilderness years, it would be the 90s, or the very early 2000s at least. But in terms of the Doctor Who TV episodes, the most polarizing is either the 1980s or the 2010s, depending who you ask. This is mainly due to the mixed reception to both the Stephen Moffat era and to Series 11, the start of the Chris Chibnall era, which has just gotten even more polarizing with Series 12, but that's in 2020, so we'll get to that next decade, which is the current decade. At time recording, it's 2021, and Series 13 will be out later this year. The 2010s saw the broadcasts of Series 5 through to 11, or seasons 31 to 37. So we got about 7 series of Doctor Who across 10 years. This is due to the 2010s having a few more gap years, as it had 2016 and 2019 off with only one episode each, a Christmas and New Year's special respectively, and Series 7 being split over to 2012 and 2013. With the former having 6 episodes and the latter having 10 episodes. 2018 had 10 episodes, but the other years would have between 13 and 14. This is in comparison to the late 2010s, which had a series every year apart from 2009, mid to late 2000s, so 2005 to 9, that had the series every year apart from the last year, where it was a gap year. But the difference between that one and the other 2 gap years is that had 3 episodes of Doctor Who, as well as a whole bunch of spin-offs, 5 episodes of Torchwood, 12 episodes of Sarah Jane, and the first episode of K9 in the UK, with the rest of the series coming in 2010. 2016 had 1 Doctor Who episode and 8 class episodes. You could also count the 6 episodes of Power of the Daleks, and 2019 had 1 episode of Doctor Who. You could also count the 4 episodes of Macra that and Power were reanimated, and same for the animated ones 2013 and 14. But in terms of brand new original stories, 2019 is probably the lowest amount of Doctor Who or Doctor Who television stories we've gotten since the show came back. Thankfully, 2021 will not be beating that record. Thank God. And even taking animated stories into account, it's probably still the lowest overall. But we're not here to talk about the amount of stories in each year. We're here to talk about the stories that did come about in those years, and I'll be ranking my personal favorite 10. But before we begin, the honourable and dishonourable mentions, starting with both a honourable and dishonourable mention for the same Doctor, because I'm doing 1 honourable and 1 dishonourable mention for each of the 3 Doctors who had 10 years in this era. The main 3 Doctors, the 11th, 12th, and 13th Doctors, as the incumbent incarnations for series 5 through to 11. But there was one other Doctor who had at least 1 episode in this decade where they were the incumbent Doctor, and that was, of course, the 10th Doctor in The End of Time Part 2. So my honourable/dishonourable mention for the 10th Doctor is The End of Time, from the 2008 to 10 specials, or Season 30 or Series 4 specials. Yeah, so the end of time, as I mentioned, I'm counting it's my 10th Doctor honorable and dishonorable mention story because technically it broadcast half of the story in this decade. So I'm counting it as a honorables and dishonorable mention for the 10th Doctor. It wasn't good enough to make the top 10 itself, so here it is as a honorable and dishonorable mention for 10. And we'll do the dishonorable mentions first. For the 11th Doctor, it's Asylum of the Daleks from Series 7 or Season 33. For the 12th Doctor, it's, well, what else could it be? Hellbent from Series 9 or Season 35. And finally, for the 13th Doctor, and this might be surprising to some viewers, that this is believe it or not, the least worst of the three dishonorable mentions. The Saranga Conundrums from Series 11 or Season 37. At time recording, my least favourite 13th Doctor is Orphan 55, but that's from Series 12, which is in 2020, so none of the Series 12 stuff will be on this list. So the least favourite episode of Series 11, my least favourite episode of Series 11, instead becomes a dishonourable mention as that aired in the 2010s, and that is the Saranga Conundrum. Also, I've yet to rewatch Orphan 55 for the revisitation review, so things could change, but I'm not expecting that one to go above Saranga. Then again, I have had some opinion changes, including my favourite 13th Doctor story changing, so yeah, things can always change. And speaking about positivity, honourable mentions. The three episodes didn't quite make the top 10 for their respective Doctors. Starting off with the 11th Doctor, it is the honourable mention for him is A Good Man Goes to War from Series 6 or Season 32. For the 12th Doctor, it is Under the Lake and Before the Flood from Season 35 or Series 9. And for the 13th Doctor, it's another Series 11 or Season 37 story, of course, because we're only doing Series 11 stories for the 13th Doctor in this ranking. This one is The Woman Who Fell to Earth. So, with the honourable and dishonourable mentions out of the way, let's get on to the actual list. We've got 10 stories from the 11th, 12th, and 13th Doctor series to go through from across the 7 series. Starting with number 10, my favourite episode from Series 8 or Season 34, Flatline. Yep, Flatline. This is a really creative and really imaginative science fiction story. It's also a modern day Earthbound setting story, and it works really nicely with it. This is also the only episode that has Clara as the Doctor actually being a good thing for the story, as opposed to being annoying. Or part of the Series 9 character arc that she went on. But this is Series 8, so we're not there yet. This is probably Clara as the Doctor at its best, or at the very least annoying. And the Doctor being trapped inside the TARDIS and the small TARDIS. It's really great imaginative ideas. My only real kind of issue with it is that the villains themselves aren't really that fleshly developed. Character-wise, we don't really know an awful lot about them, but they're still really great and imaginative creatures, and they're a pretty great threat. Moving on to number 9, my second favourite of the series finales from this decade, and one of my favourite of the new series finales. The Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang from Series 5 or Season 31. Yeah, expect a lot of Series 5 love on this list. At least 3 stories from this list are from Series 5. But the Pandorica Opens and the Big Bang is one of the best of the new series finales. It's definitely up in the top 6, along with another one that will be later on this list featuring the 12th Doctor and the 4 Russell T Davies ones. Yeah. Although there is another Matt Smith series finale I would put 7th, but that didn't quite make the top 10, nor even honourable mention positions, but never mind. But yeah, Pandora Opens the Big Bang. The first episode is a great episode where everything's kind of building up to this big climactic adventure, and then part 2 is a more character-based one, which is brilliant. You don't have to go big and bombastic like Russell T Davies did every other series. He went more and more big and bombastic each year. But with Pandora opens, it starts as going that way, but then it calms down a little bit to have a more character-driven finale, which works brilliantly. And with the universe kind of falling in on itself, it makes an awful lot of sense to have a more calmed down part two after the really loud and big part one. It's a really great and effective finale, and it just is absolutely magnificent. And it proves Stephen Moffat can write a great finale. And the other story, the other finale that will be on this list that's coming up later down the line will also prove that. But between this story and the one that's coming out later down the line, he wasn't that great with series finales, apart from one other which didn't quite make this list, but and that's the Series 7 finale. But that was still my favourite from Series 7, apart from a certain special that'll be coming up later on. But yeah, but besides the Series 7 one, there wasn't really a great finale to a series between 5 and the one that's coming up later. But more on the series finales later when I get to that story. In the meantime, let's stick on Series 5, stay on Series 5, Season 31, with the series opener next, as my number 8 choice is The 11th Hour. This might come as a shock to some people because not only is this a very popular story, but I've already gone on record saying how great this episode is. It's my second favourite from Series 5. It was probably top 5. Yeah, I think maybe 3 or 4th. Yeah, I think 4th on my top 10 11th Doctor stories list, which means we've got another 3 stories of the 11th Doctor here. And yeah, about half the stories on this list will be 11th Doctor stories. And that's not just a bias towards my favourite Doctor. No, the 11th Doctor generally has the most good stories of the 3 Doctors in this in this decade. Even when counting Series 12, I would still probably say 11 has more good stories than 13 does. And I think a lot of people would kind of probably agree with that, unless maybe you prefer the Capaldi or Whittaker series more than Smith's. But I suppose it depends on the person. I think the Smith stories are usually a little bit better than Capaldi and Whittaker's, but that doesn't mean they're all perfect. I mean, it's not like the Russell T Davies stories where there was like only 2 or 3 not so good ones. But I think the Smiths era had a few more better stories than the other 2 that came in this decade and the early 2020s. But some people may be surprised that 11th Hour is this low in the decade ranking because it's a very popular story and lots of people love it, including myself, and I've gone on record saying so. In fact, I stand by the fact that it's probably the best post-regeneration story, but more the best first story for a Doctor of the entire show, although classic fans don't fret, Spearhead from Space is a close second. But even with that opinion, I just think there are 7 stories of this in this decade that are better than the 11th Hour, including 3 more Matt Smith stories, which includes the next one on this list. So we've got 3 Matt Smith stories back to back, but this one's not from Series 5. This time it's from Series 6, or Season 32, and it's my favourite story from this season, The Doctor's Wife. This is a brilliant episode. Neil Gaiman does a fantastic job writing this great sci-fi character story where the TARDIS is taken out of the box basically and put into the body of this woman, and we get some great character interactions between her and the Doctor, whilst this mysterious entity called House tries to take the possession of the actual TARDIS machine and tries to fuck around with Amy and Rory. Plus, it's another episode with an Ood, and we've got a great episode here. It's a really great adventure, really rocketing adventure. Also, fun fact, this is the first television story to establish Time Lords are able to change genders with regenerations, though I don't think this would be a shock to many people due to, at the time of the episode broadcasting, because they could probably have been speculating about it for decades before. Heck, even as far back as the 1980s, there were even talks about maybe casting a woman as the Doctor, so yeah, it would probably not have been a surprise for people back in 2011. But that's just saying it, not actually doing it. We won't actually see a female Time Lord who was previously a male incarnation until 2014, and I don't think we've had a male incarnation who was previously female, or at least not yet established, although it's speculated that the General in Hellbent may have been female more often than male before maybe they were even born that way. And of course, we got our first female Doctor in 2017. But we're not really here to talk about that, we're here to talk about the story, and the story is awesome. The story is really fun, it's really greatly character-driven, and just absolutely brilliant. So, Doctor's Wife, fantastic story, and the best of Series 6, in my opinion. Good Man Goes to War was my second favourite. That's why it was the honourable mention for 11, and that was what was next on my 11th Doctor Stories list ranking. Um, Moving on to number 6, let's get some 13th Doctor love in now. After a 112 and a couple of 11, let's get some 13th Doctor love in. So like I said in my Series 11 ranking, I like Series 11. I like the Jodie Whittaker era. I like the Christian era. So I'm not a huge fan of it, but I enjoyed Series 11 on my rewatchings, and I'm liking the era more, apart from some strange decisions that they're making. Timeless Child. But the whole Timeless Child stuff doesn't happen in 2010s, so we won't talk about it because it's not part of the 2010s. We have to wait till the 2020s. So don't comment about it. I'm banning all comments on the Timeless Child because it's not part of the 2010s. You have been warned. And this is the first of 2 13th Doctor stories that will be on this list, but what 2 episodes could they be? What's my second favourite 13th Doctor story, or at least second favourite Series 11 story? Well, it previously was my favourite, but then it changed. And so my second favourite 13th Doctor and my 6th favourite, yes, from the 2010s, is Rosa from Series 11 or Season 37. This is a fantastic episode dealing with the subject of race discrimination and racism and the events of the Southern American states during the 1950s, just before the beginning of the civil rights movements, and with Rosa Parks on the bus and her famous not refusing to give up her seat for a white person. And it's a really great story dealing with that, and dealing with this time traveler trying to come back in time and try to screw everything up, basically, because they are a space racist. That is probably the weakest element of this story, is that the villain is just a bit boring and bland, and his motivation is he's a space racist, and that's about it. Great. But everything else is awesome. Yeah, it might be a bit tough to watch the episode on a few viewings, but that's when you know an episode is working. That's when you know it's doing its job right. Because if it didn't make you feel this way, either the episode is doing something wrong, or there's something wrong with you. I mean, if you're a racist or a Nazi like some guy, it's probably you, but otherwise it's probably the episode. But thankfully the episode is very good at achieving its goals and setting out what it needs to do. It's only really the villain that it kind of has an issue with, doesn't really work with. But I do think a sci-fi element was needed for this story to have this story work. I don't think it would have worked as a 100% pure historical like some people have wanted it to be, because you need something to happen, as not just Rosa getting on the bus and then protesting, etc. You need something else to happen before that. Otherwise, what's the point of having the story? But at the same time, we can't have it go to science fiction, because that would get in the way of the historical events and having stuff. So going a kind of, there is a sci-fi element, but it's not huge. It is quite important to the story, but it doesn't really interfere with where they're trying to interfere with time, but it doesn't get in the way of the message and the story. Then that's where this story works, and it works really well. It's just that the villain wasn't that well developed. Moving on to number 5, a story that did have some aliens, but it did work in the historical context. And this is now my current favourite episode from the Jodie Whittaker era. From Series 11 or Season 37, it is Demons of the Punjab. Demons of the Punjab does something similar to Rosa, though swap historical figure for new characters who are related to one of our companions, and do a Romeo and Juliet-esque style story, as Mr. TARDIS Reviews called it in. I think it might have been his own historical stories ranking of the new series. Yeah, because it's dealing with the partition of India, it's a big topic, big historical event. You would have to pin it down somewhere, but it would be difficult to pin it down on one specific thing. So writer Vinay Patel decides to write a story about Yaz's family and what happened to them during the partition, and it works fantastically. The Vajavians, I can understand people not liking them in the episode, and not thinking they're necessary. My good friend Matt Moyer actually wrote into Doctor Magazine commenting on how much he loved the episode, but didn't think the Vajarians were needed for it. And back when I initially reviewed it and saw the episode, I kind of thought the same way as him and other people at the time. But then over time, I thought actually the episode's a 10 out of 10, even with those aliens being in it. And after rewatching the episode, not only did I think that, but I kind of started to think actually the aliens being in the episode does kind of make a lot of sense because they're there to observe people who are killed without being seen by anyone, well, apart from maybe their killers. And that makes a lot of sense and ties in really well with the story we're going for. Not to mention, with or without the aliens, this story is a dead easy 10 out of 10 and would dead easy be the best story of the 13th Doctor's era so far. So that's why it topped Rosa after the rewatch. So yeah, Demons of the Punjab, it's just a fantastic episode. I've recently reviewed these two episodes and talked about them in the Series 11 ranking, so I won't go into them too much. But I certainly recommend, if you haven't checked out the Jodie Whittaker era yet, these are two episodes to check out. Also alongside The Woman Who Fell to Earth, and also I would also throw in Resolution, which would also be, and those would be my top 4 of Series 11, but also Resolution's a great Dalek story to check out. So those are my 4 recommendations for newbies wanting to check out some Series 11. But yeah, Demons of the Punjab, fantastic. And seeing that's my favourite 13th Doctor story, both from Series 11 and from overall at current time, well, that means that's kind of it for 13th Doctor stories. Going to go back to 11 and 12 now. First of all, back to the 11th Doctor for my favourite episode from Series 5 and my second favourite episode from his era, Vincent and the Doctor. What's this? Another character-driven historical story that's just so fucking fantastic? Why? We've not just had 2 of those already, have we? And now we've got another one? Wow! It's like the historical episodes are like, well, with Jodie Whittaker, they're like some of the best ones. But we've also got a couple of great ones in the 11th and 12th Doctor's era, and Vincent and the Doctor is high above heels the best of the historicals of the new series, and heck, probably even the best historical of the show. By the way, I say historical as an overall thing because it is a pseudo-historical, and also a celebrity historical figure historical with Vincent van Gogh. But this one's probably the best of the historicals, using an umbrella term to cover all of them. It's such a great emotional story. The character interactions between the Doctor, Amy, and Vincent van Gogh are fantastic. Tony Curran is amazing as Vincent van Gogh, and they capture his depression brilliantly. Again, you could debate whether you needed the monster in this episode, but again, that's why the Doctor and Amy go to Vincent van Gogh in the first place. And also, it's a nice, well, I wouldn't say nice, but it's a good sort of physical representation of Vincent van Gogh's depression and mental illness. It's a brilliant mirror representation, mirror reflecting what's seen inside, and the fact that it's invisible further emphasizes that, and that it's afraid and lonely. That's how people like Vincent van Gogh feel, and the episode captures that perfectly. Also, the final couple scenes are some of the most beautiful scenes in the show, where the Doctor and Amy take Vincent van Gogh to the museum in the future and speak to Bill Nighy about his paintings, and Vincent gets teary-eyed about being beloved by everybody. Before the Doctor and Amy then go back and realise that they haven't really changed anything apart from preventing Vincent from being killed by a invisible monster. But they haven't really, despite what he said about going out to paint more pictures, he's only really done the one more one of the sunflowers, and that's really about it before his suicide a year after, or roughly a year after, when he met the Doctor and Amy. It's heartbreaking, but it does end on a sweet note with the sunflower picture being for Amy. And as written by Vincent, he writes a little note as it's saying it's for Amy from him. It's heartbreaking but sweet at the same time, and it's just absolutely brilliant. It's one of the best endings to an episode of Doctor Who. It's sweet but heartbreaking. This is an episode Doctor Who co-creator Sydney Newman would be proud of. Moving on to number 3. Well, we've had a couple of historical stories. Let's have a futuristic one now, as we move into the 12th Doctor's top 2 territory with my second favourite 12th Doctor story and my favourite from Series 10 or Season 36, and easily the best Cyberman story since Tomb of the Cybermen, although I do love Attack of the Cybermen and Earthshock as well. But my favourite Cyberman story since Tomb of the Cybermen is World Enough in Time and The Doctor Falls. This is easily the best final Doctor story since Bad Wolf Parting the Ways, had it actually been the final Doctor story, because Twice Upon a Time came along. But this is now my second favourite pre-regeneration story after the one that's coming up later. The second best penultimate story for a Doctor. Peter Capaldi is just absolutely outstanding as the Doctor. There is one more story that's on this list that I think has his best performance, but this is his second best performance. This is just outstanding. This is also my favourite series finale from the Stephen Moffat years, and my second favourite series finale of the Revived series, and maybe also my second favourite finale of the show overall. Welcome Nothing Time Dr. Phil's just spectacularly done. Amazing direction from Rachel Talani. Not her best directed 2 episodes, but probably the second and third, with Welcome Nothing Time, then Dr. Falls, 2 and 3 respectively. Fantastic final story for Bill Potts, not counting what happened in Twice Upon a Time, but that's not the flesh and body Bill Potts, that's the memories on the glass person. And technically half this story she is a Cyberman, but I'm kind of counting it. It was her body that was upgraded, plus as a puddle. But yeah, fantastic final story besides Twice Upon a Time for Bill Potts. Fantastic final story for Nardole, Missy, the John Sim Master, and the Mondasian Cybermen make a triumph return. The only real bad stuff about it is the usual Stephen Moffat stuff that we see early on in the episode, but he gets that stuff right out of the way as fast as possible, and then we get onto the really good stuff with Bill being shot in the chest, the heart being gone, and then being taken down by the patients to be upgraded into a Mondasian Cyberman. Although I'm not so happy that we're calling them the Mondasian Cybermen. We just call them Cybermen, but oh well. But basically, she goes off to become a Cyberman, and the Doctor is too late to save her. This shows that the Doctor isn't able to save everyone all the time, or even the Doctor's closest friends can be saved. And what's more, this is just the typical routine distress call answering thing. This isn't a big build up to the end sort of situation like the end of time or the time of the Doctor, and they weren't even brought here against their will like Bad Wolf Parting of the Ways. This is them just turning up, and shit goes down, and ultimately they all pay the price. A bit like Caves of Androzani, actually, when Five and Perry ended up on Androzani, just on a normal adventure, and then they get flung into danger pretty much almost straight away, and eventually Perry is close to death, and the Doctor sacrifices himself to save her. Something not too dissimilar happens here, except this time he is unable to save his companion, and it's Heather the Puddle Girl who has to give her a happy ending, otherwise she's a Cyberman, and that sucks. But yeah, it's quite shocking to see Bill turn into a Cyberman, but with her becoming a puddle, we do get a happy ending following this hardship, which is great. Although if she had died, it still would have been great, but she did get a happy ending, thank goodness, and this is one of the times where not dying actually works. And of course, it's a great ending for the 12th Doctor. Minus the epilogue, that was his final story that came afterwards, which is one of his weakest stories, but we won't talk about that. Instead, let's talk about the best 12th Doctor story, which is my number 2 choice of this list, and that is from Series 9, believe it or not, or Season 38, Heaven Sent. Oh, now you can believe it. Heaven Sent is easily one of the most visually stunning and greatly directed episodes, with easily the best performance from any Doctor. Sorry, Tom Baker fans. Sorry, David Tennant fans. Heck, the 12th Doctor is not even one of my all-time favourite Doctors, but Capaldi is up there for Doctor actors. But despite the 12th Doctor not being, I think he's around the middle of my Doctor's ranking, but it's mainly due to stories like this, and Welcome Nothing Time Doctor Falls is why he's I have a positive opinion of him, but it's stuff like maybe Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, where he's a bit more of the negative side, and then maybe stuff in Series 8 is kind of like it's kind of in the middle. So that's probably why 12 is probably around the middle in my Doctor's list. But Heaven Sent, despite the 12th Doctor not being one of my favourite Doctors, I still think this has got the best performance from any actor. Peter Capaldi is just absolutely outstanding as the Doctor, even when his characterization is not that great. Thankfully, Heaven Sent has the 12th Doctor at an all-time high, as does Welcome Nothing Time and the Doctor Falls. It's just absolutely fantastic, and I would have liked to have had Peter Capaldi stay on for Series 8. It was his choice not to carry on, but not Series 8, Series 11. It would have been nice, but his decision to go after Series 10, which is fair. But still, he had some brilliant episodes. Maybe not as many as Smith, but he was just absolutely amazing throughout. Even when his character wasn't very good, he was still amazing. And Heaven Sent. It's basically the 12th Doctor Peter Capaldi showcase. Basically, he's up against one monster in one location. Although we do get to visit different rooms of that location, but it's like if you're stuck in a castle and you just go to different rooms, but that's about it. But that's fine because it works so well for this story and ties in really well. We also have the use of the Mind Palace that Stephen Moffat used in Sherlock, really well effective in and used in this story, and it also works really well as a getting over the grief of the death of a companion slash loved one story, much like many of the episodes of Series 11 would do. Except this time around, he's only got 15 minutes to do to get over his grief of Clara after her death in Face the Raven, and it's done really well, and it's just a magnificent episode. The only real downside of this episode is that it is very heavily tied in with the series arc, which has a very disappointing conclusion in the next episode. My dishonourable 12th Doctor mention, as I mentioned earlier. But we won't talk about that. But other than the tie-ins to the hybrid and one or two continuity changes that the hybrid arc was involved with, this is a fantastic episode, and definitely the best of the 12th Doctor's era and the second best of the 2010s. But there's still one more story from the 2010s that I love even more than Heaven Sent, and it is the last 11th Doctor story we've got to talk about, and it's technically the Series 7 story that I mentioned would be coming up, the Series 7 special. I suppose it's from the 2013 specials, so Series 7 or Season 33 specials. And I think you all know what this is going to be. This is, of course, the 50th anniversary special, The Day of the Doctor. Yeah, if you know me, you'll know that this is my all-time favourite Doctor Who television story. At least at the moment. We'll see if anything in the future could change that. I mean, it's always possible. 2 years before I saw this story, I watched Remembrance of the Daleks for the first time. That became my favourite story when I saw that. It only took 2 years to be replaced by a brand new story. Never say never. As I mentioned, my favourite 13th Doctor story changed from Rosa to Demons of the Punjab. So even favourites are eligible to change at some point, perhaps. Depends what goes on. But after 7.5 nearly years since I've seen this episode for the first time, it's still my favorite episode, and the first viewing of that story was one of the best experiences I've had when watching this show. And rewatching it at other times, it's still amazing. Even for the most recent viewing, it was still fucking awesome. It was amazing. For starters, I've got my favourite Doctor, Matt Smith, being awesome. Yeah, there's a few bits of him being a little bit childlike in some places, which got his Doctor that reputation, certainly in later series as well, Series 7 specifically. But there's still some of that dark, serious side that I saw in the earlier episodes when I rewatched that. David Tennant fits back into the role of the 10th Doctor, nice and snugly, just like Patrick Troughton did in the 2 Doctors, and 2 Doctors as well, but mainly 3 Doctors and 5 Doctors, but also 2 Doctors, and John Pertwee in the 5 Doctors as well. John Hurt is amazing as the War Doctor. I know some people say he's not that necessary, but, would you prefer 8 or 9 pressing the button? Well, in all honesty, they couldn't get Christopher Eccleston. He declined, and Moffat couldn't see Paul McGann pressing the button, and I could see his thought process on not thinking 8 could press that button, and 9 is basically the direct reaction to the Time War. So it does have a lot of sense having another Doctor between 8 and 9, although this would be the start of continuity fuck-ups regarding the Doctors and their numbering and plating. Thankfully, this is the least worst time of that. It actually gets worse with the next episode. And then more recently, but that's a 2020 thing, not a 2010 to 19 thing. Regardless, John Hurt is amazing as the War Doctor. And whilst he's not the villainous Doctor we were kind of expecting him to be, he's just the one who caused the genocide in the or at least that's what they thought. He's the one who caused the genocide of the Time Lords, and that's why they put him to the back of their mind. Plus, he didn't consider himself a Doctor, hence why he's the War Doctor, not the 9th Doctor, and the 9th Doctor is the 9th Doctor instead of the 10th, etc. But yeah, but John Hurt's awesome. I also recently acquired this War Doctor figure that I bought off eBay, and it actually arrived the day before the day I'm recording this video. I also think Clara's a little bit better in this story than she was in some of the previous episodes of Series 7. After bringing her back again, she wasn't that great. Maybe a bit in the name of the Doctor, but that's probably about it. She will get some characterization in Series 8, but yeah, she's probably a bit better here than she was in most of the second half of Series 7 Part 2. And also Billy Piper's great, returning as the Bad Wolf / the Moment taking Rose Tyler's form. That was great, and we got some great supporting characters. And the Zygons, whilst not the go-to monsters for an anniversary special, they're still really great, and also set up the Zygon 2-parter in Series 9 really nicely. But even without that, they're still really great presence. Also, this is the best depiction of the Daleks in the Moffat era, along with the next episode, Time of the Doctor. At times when they weren't having a very good time with their own main stories. Victor of the Daleks, which I did like, but it is very flawed. Son of the Daleks, which is absolute shit, which is why it's my dishonourable mention for 11. Into the Dalek, liked it, but not hugely. I thought it was okay. And then Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, that is also shit and ruins the Daleks, basically, in that one. So, yes, they weren't having a very good time with their own stories, but when they were having big cameos, or small cameos even, apart from the one in Hellbent, which was pointless, they were pretty great. So yeah, this and Time of the Doctor were their best depictions in the Moffat era. And yeah, it was awesome to see them in the Time War. And that's not even mentioning the great script by Stephen Moffat, the great directing from Nick Curran, the great editing for the most part. So there was a few bits that wasn't so great, but mostly great editing, and just everybody putting 100% effort into making this story absolutely amazing. Also, I love the Tom Baker cameo as the curator. He's awesome. And that final scene, whilst it does lack 12 and it doesn't really tie into what we see later on in the series, it's still a lovely image. Maybe it's a dream sequence. That's probably why 12's not there and why it doesn't tie into continuity later. But yeah, it's just a fantastic final scene. And so Day of the Doctor easily takes the #1 spot of my top 10 2010 stories and my current #1 story of the entire show. So to wrap up the 2010 stories ranking, number 10, Flatline from Series 8. Number 9, The Pandoric Opens and the Big Bang from Series 5. Number 8, The 11th Hour from Series 5. Number 7, The Doctor's Wife from Series 6. Number 6, Rosa from Series 11. Number 5, Demons of the Punjab from Series 11. Number 4, Vincent and the Doctor from Series 5. Number 3, Woken Up in Time and the Doctor Falls from Series 10. Number 2, Heaven Sent from Series 9. And number 1, The Day of the Doctor from the 2013 specials, or the Series 7 specials. And to recap, Series 5 is Season 31, Series 6 is 32, 7 is 33, and the 2013 specials can also be known as the Season 33 specials. 8 is 34, 9 is 35, 10 is 36, and 11 is 37. And that's it from my top 10 stories from Doctor Who in the 2010s. That's it from me. Thank you so much for watching this ranking. And that's probably the last of these rankings I'll be doing until 2030. if we even do it in 2030. 9 years away. But it won't be the last Doctor Who ranking, because we've still got Series 12s to go, and I'll probably also do a top 10 13th Doctor stories as of Revolution of the Daleks, with an updated version after Series 13 comes out. And then we'll probably get some more rankings come up later on in the year as well, because I've got quite a few rankings to do once I've finished Series 12's revisitation reviews. But speaking of Series 12, its reviews are coming up soon. I will be starting the Series 12 reviews with Spyfall, the first 2 episodes of Series 12, and that begins the home run of the final series of Doctor Who at time of recording, because Series 13 is in production and it's on its way. So once I'm done with the Series 12 reviews and rankings, we will be right up to date until Series 13 comes out. Woo! So yeah, and also that's Season 38, and Season 39 is the one in production. So yeah, 38th and final season to go, with the 39th in production. Epic. So I'll see you guys in a few days' time for my revisitation review of Spyfall and the start of the Series 12 or Season 38 revisitation reviews. Until then, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye. don't forget to click below to subscribe to the Nicholas Payne YouTube channel.